For this tutorial video, I'm going to demonstrate how I use colored pencils to create depth in my images. For our inspiration, we're going to be using this apple. If I were to ask you what color this apple is, most people would say red, which is right. However, there's a lot more going on here. Let's take a closer look and really evaluate what colors are happening in this image. For me, yellow is the most obvious color after red. There's lots of touches of it that overlap into orange. There's also greens, especially in the stem as well as in the core of the apple. There's brown in the core, the stem, as well as in some of the shadows. And then, of course, white. Now, there are many other colors that are evident in the apple when you truly zoom in and concentrate on what those colors are, but those are the colors that we're going to start with. The next important factor to consider when trying to create depth in your image using color is the color wheel. I always start with my shadows as the complement of the main color that I'm using. For our apple, our main color is red, so green is the color I'll be starting with. If you're not sure what the complement is to a color, pull out a color wheel. Whatever color is directly across from it is its complement. First, I'm going to identify the shadows. One of the deepest shadows in this image is the core, where the stem is. While identifying the colors correctly is extremely important when trying to create depth, another thing you want to consider is creating strokes with your colored pencil that actually follow the shape of whatever your object is. Since this is a round apple, you'll notice that my pencil lines follow that same idea. Where it's arcing over the side of the apple, I'm making the line curve. Where the bottom of the apple is starting to curve up towards the stem, the same motion is happening. I'm adding a little bit of green to the stem here. It helps to create that dark brown if you mix your red and green together in this part. But the entire stem has a slight green tint to it. That gives us that leafy plant-like look. Another reason we use green is because green is a cool color. Cool colors recede to our eye, so it helps make a convincing shadow. I'm going to start laying in my mid-tone. For this apple, it's going to be yellow. Yellow is a helpful color not only because you can see it obviously in the apple, but just like green is a cool color that recedes away from you, yellow is a warm color that advances. It comes towards you. So this helps us make a convincing round object. We've got the cool on the one side, the warm on the top, and those lines that lead our eye to believe the shape that we're trying to create makes for a very realistic depth. I'm also laying in yellow in the stem for the same reason. If you analyze the apple itself, there's a lot of a yellowish green tint to the entire stem, but it also helps to create that round depth that we need. All right, let's jump into our main color, red. At this point, I'm just beginning to layer on top. I'm blending and mixing the colors that I've already laid down, leaving a little bit of the yellow so that way it bleeds through because you can see it that way in the apple. I'm using the same kind of strokes where I'm following the shape of the apple. I'm not going straight up and down or different directions or in little circles. I'm actually making arcing strokes. You'll notice that I'm varying my pressure. Sometimes I color light to kind of shift the colors, but other times I'm using a lot of pressure to really build up the wax and blend things together. That's especially apparent here in this shadow of the core, where I want the green to show, but not so obvious that your eye says green. Something I want you to realize is just because you've started coloring with one color doesn't mean you have to stick with it. You may have noticed that I've pulled the yellow back out several times lately. That's because the red was getting a little harsh, or the lines where they met weren't meeting up seamlessly. By taking that yellow back out, I can smooth it over as it's one of our midtones and make it look more natural because the yellow is already there and the red is softening into that portion of the apple. You may have noticed that I've also left a little bit of a spot that's still white. I haven't colored through it completely red. I have a light stroke of the color near the circle, but I've left a pretty good little circle completely white. That's because that highlight is completely white and I'll never be able to get it back if I color it red. This way I can pull a little bit of the red to get the reflection of the color inside of the highlight, but not lose that bright pop. In this area, there's a lot more yellow showing through, so I'm pulling back the yellow to make it a little brighter, more intense, and pulling it through the red in order to create that in-between orange that the apple naturally grows. Now that the bulk of the apple's color is in, I'm going to go in and focus on the details. The stem color was green and yellow. The complement of yellow is violet, so I'm taking the violet to make a nice deep brown with the yellow and green that we've got in there. Amazing how those combination of colors can make an earthy brown. Our whites. If you look closely at the image of the apple, the light is reflecting off that edge, which also helps portray the roundness of the object as well as the shininess of the skin. I'm actually coloring around the white pop before I fill in the middle. That's going to kind of help blend and push that pinky orange into the pop so it doesn't seem too fake. And finally, we're going to add in the base shadow. This helps prevent our apple from appearing like it's floating away. Because the apple is red, it's going to reflect slightly into the shadow, that red tint. So I'm using red and green and a tiny amount of white to kind of help blend the edges together. And that ends this tutorial. Thanks for watching. The background music I got from bensound.com. If you're interested in following along with me, the worksheet will be available on my Teachers Play Teachers page, and I will also be creating the same worksheet but with a green apple so you can see the variation in color. Thanks!